And good morning, friends. Thanks for joining us on the Bright Side. I am Pharmacist Ben, and our number 844-236-6010 if you have questions about health, nutrition, prescription drugs. We love hearing from you. If you want to wean yourself off your meds and get on a good nutritional supplement program, if you have a comment or success story you'd like to share, we love hearing those too. 844-236-6010 is our number on the Bright Side. If you want to purchase longevity products, you can call 866-735-2470, 866-735-2470, and you can also head to brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com and purchase longevity products right off the website. You can also sign up to join the Brightside Ben team for a one-time $30 fee. You can be in business for yourself. Call 866-735-2470 if you want more information, or just click on the Join the Team link at brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com. Now is an unbelievably perfect time to start a home-based business. It's only going to get worse, folks. This whole economic thing that we're going through and this financial change that we're going through, it's only going to get worse. But we can do something about it. We can be proactive. If you're in fear or you're in worry, action neutralizes worry. Doing something, just doing something. Pick up the phone. Call 866-735-2470. Ask about joining the Brightside Ben team. Ask about starting a home-based business. If you're in fear or you're in worry about your financial condition and financial state, I know a lot of people are, you owe it to yourself to at least take a look, at least inquire. Call 866-735-2470 or click on the Join the Team link at brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com. And also, do not forget to check out Truth Skin Health Products at truthtreatments.com. Check out our over 800 5-star reviews. I am telling you, folks, we get 4 or 5, probably get maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 5-star reviews on a daily basis. It's unbelievable, really. I know what it is. I know what I'm doing to the products. I've been using them myself now for 30 years since I started developing them in my pharmacy. So I'm not surprised, but I'm still blown away by the kind of reviews that True Skin Health Products, Truth Treatments are getting. Just check them out yourself at truthreviewed.com. truthreviewed.com. All right, our number today, 844-236-6010. We do have a super cool guest coming up at the bottom of the hour, David Burns, Dr. David Burns, MD. He wrote a book many years ago. I read it probably about 12 years ago or 13 years ago, called Feeling Good. It was about something called cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is, as the name sounds, as you can deduce from the words, cognitive, meaning your mind, your ability to cognate or to think. Behavioral therapy, the relationship between mind and behavior. And cognitive behavioral therapy is also known as thought therapy or talk therapy. And it's started probably about maybe 40 or 50 years ago as a form of psychotherapy. But now it's pretty much taken over. It's pretty much the main form of psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, where you talk and cognate and work on your thoughts, work on your mind. Dr. David Burns wrote a book that I read called Feeling Good. And I read it in probably, 10, 11 years ago. I've always been fascinated with cognitive behavioral therapy, the idea of using your brain. Being a mental type person myself, I use my mind a lot. So I figure, you use your mind for better or worse. You might as well use it for better because you're using it for worse. Anyway, I've always been fascinated with, at least my whole adult life, I've been fascinated with mind power and personal development kinds of things. So I read this book, and it was a pretty cool book. But now he's got a new book called Feeling Great. And he calls it a revolutionary new treatment for depression and anxiety. And apparently, when people read Feeling Good, there was a few folks who confronted what Dr. Burns calls therapeutic resistance. That is a resistance to the therapeutic protocols. And so he wrote a follow-up book. It's not out yet, unfortunately, so I haven't gotten a chance to read it. So I'm just going to get to pick David's brain on this myself. But his new book is designed to address therapeutic resistance. It's designed to address people who just don't get the benefits that they could from cognitive behavioral therapy. So we'll talk to David at the bottom of the hour, and we'll get your calls next segment, 844-236-6010. Our problems, we talk about this a lot in terms of the health of the body. We say that if you're sick or you know somebody who's sick or you want to help people, you don't have to remember anything but this. Where you see the problem is not where the problem begins. That's the most important idea in healing and health. And it's the reason, or lack of understanding of this principle, is the reason for the failure of the medical model. In a nutshell, the medical model addresses the problem where the problem is, which, by the way, is great for surgery. It's great if you break your leg. If you break your leg, you want somebody addressing the problem where it is. And that's understandable. However, when it comes to the complexity of metabolism, how the body is put together, all of the organs, the networking and the system of the body, where you see the body is the problem is not where the problem is. And if you try to interrupt the problem by mechanical means, you're only going to make the problem worse. I remember I read a book when I was a little kid called The Cat in the Hat Comes Back, or The Cat in the Hat. One or the other. I forgot if it was the original or the sequel. And the moral, the gist of the story is that some guy gets a stain in the snow, and then the cat comes and gets rid of the stain, but he makes a bigger stain somewhere else. And then he gets another cat, gets rid of the bigger stain, but they make a bigger stain somewhere else. And they keep solving the problem by making bigger and bigger problems. And that's exactly how the medical model works. And it does this because it tries to treat the problem where it sees the problem. This is not only ignorant, it's doomed to failure, as is evidenced by our ridiculous healthcare situation. This thing that's going on today, this so-called pandemic, this is the end result of the decrepitude of our bodies, of our collective bodies. It's because we're not addressing the problem where the problem is. It's true mentally too. If you're in fear, or you're depressed, or you're suicidal, or you have worry or angst or any unpleasant feelings, the problem isn't where you think the problem is. It's not your boss. It's not your husband or wife. It's not your girlfriend. It's not your money situation. That's not where the problem is. The problem is deep. It's in usually childhood, for that matter. There's a really cool book called Scared Straight, or it's just called Scared, actually. Scared Sick, it's called. Scared Sick. It's about the relationship between adverse childhood reactions and adverse childhood traumas or adverse childhood experiences and disease later on in life. That's just how it is. If we're really serious about addressing our health issues, we've got to go deep. The primary cause of all stress, of all angst, of all feeling crappy, of all suffering, of all unhappiness, whatever you want to call it that sucks about life, the primary cause is fear. F-E-A-R, fear. Can anyone out there relate? Fear. And not only are millions of people, billions of people living in fear, obviously it's impossible to calculate, but the vast majority of people live in some degree of fear, at least. On top of all of that, now it's being stoked. It's being encouraged. It's being promoted. If you are watching TV and you're feeling fear, something's going on. You can either turn off the TV or you can deal with it. And that's another really interesting point. We can learn to deal with fear. I'll talk about that when we come back from our break. 844-236-6010 is our number. We'll be back on the bright side right after this. Okay, we're back on the bright side. I am Pharmacist Ben, and we have lines open, 844-236-6010. We'll get your calls this segment. We've got David Burns, Dr. David Burns, coming up, author of the book Feeling Great, the Revolutionary New Treatment for Depression and Anxiety. He'll be coming up here in our next segment, and we'll get your calls, 844-236-6010. And I just want to say a couple more things about this idea of fear, and then we'll get your calls. And by the way, this is pure physical health, too. Fear manifests as contraction in the body. When we contract in the body, little pockets of tissue become hypoxic, low oxygen. Inflammation and fear have a lot in common, and you always hear about how inflammation is the cause of all diseases. Well, inflammation and fear have a lot in common. The inflammatory response is a fear response. You can say it's protection, but there's a fine line between protection and fear. They're basically the same idea. We protect ourselves when we're scared. And these little pockets of hypoxia are responsible for disease, dis-ease, out of ease. Fear is dis-ease. Dis-ease is fear. It's literally the same word, or essentially the same word. So how do you deal with it? Well, the automatic tendency for dealing with fear is contraction. There's two basic movements in this dynamic universe that we live in. It's contraction and expansion. Contraction is fear. Expansion is love. You could also say relaxation. It's this primary dichotomy. the primal dichotomy. It's the vagus, the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic. I've been talking about this for years. Now people are starting to understand it. You have something called polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory, a guy named Stephen Borges, B-O-R-G-E-S, physician, came up with this idea, and he thought it was revolutionary. When I was in pharmacy school in the 80s, I was like, wait a minute. All the things that suck about our body, about health, that we hate about health, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, thyroid problems, aging and degeneration, they're all regulated by cortisol in the sympathetic nervous system. As soon as I heard that, I was like, wait a minute. This is the key right here. This is what it means. This is why fear is not just some airy-fairy kind of idea, stress and angst and feeling crappy and fear and mental stuff. Everybody wants to know about vitamins. If we're really serious about health, we got to operate on these levels. Not just vitamins. By the way, vitamin deficiency and nutritional deficiency put the body into fear. So how do you deal with this? Well, here's how you deal with this. This is the secret to dealing with it. And when I tell you the secret to dealing with fear, I'm going to tell you you'll know the secret to dealing with stress, with angst, with feeling crappy, with suffering, unhappiness, etc. You go in. You dive in. Fear is showing us something that we don't want to feel. Fear is showing us something that needs to be corrected. Fear is showing us an area that needs to be expanded or relaxed. Fear is showing us where we're contracted. And you enter into fear. You deactivate fear by entering into it, not by running away. By relaxing into it, not contracting. That's how you deal with fear. That's what open focus is about. Talked about open focus here before. Open focus is when you look at things out of the sides of your eyes. When you look at things out of the sides of your eyes, you activate the alpha brainwaves and theta brainwaves. It's a hypnotic technique. It's also a technique that's used in shamanism for seeing auras and seeing energy fields. Open focus. You look out of the sides of your eyes, as opposed to closed focus. And when you look at it in the center of your eyes, which all of us do, we all love to be in open focus. Nobody tells them, no, you probably, unless you've been listening to me, you probably didn't even know it existed. But think about it, we all like to be open, relaxed. The parasympathetic nervous system is supposed to be working most of the time. By the way, you still need to have a sympathetic activation, but you don't need to have fear. Fear is a label. Fear is a label for a feeling. That feeling could be energy. That feeling could be excitement. That feeling could be getting your butt out of bed in the morning. But we label it as fear, and all of a sudden it becomes miserable. I was reading this book about COVID, it's called COVID, The Great Reset. I highly encourage you guys read this book. If you're interested in any way in what's going on today in terms of from a historical perspective or a macro or big picture perspective, this is a must read. It's a very short book. A couple hundred pages, and it's written by the World Economic Forum. That's what this is about. And in this book, it goes through everything. It lays it all out, what this is all about. This is not about a virus, people. This is a reset. This is an economic reset. This is a sociological reset, a political and geopolitical reset. Not about a virus. Anybody who thinks it is a sucker. Sucker, if you think that's what it is. Just read this book. It lays it all out. So anyway, I'm reading this book, and they talk about a pandemic causing worldwide changes. They talk about pandemic. You hear this word pandemic. And this is where the whole idea of fear comes from. We hear it's a pandemic. We hear fear. Where's the fear in the pandemic coming from? They're telling us. They're telling us, because they tell us it's a pandemic, it's a pandemic. They tell us to be scared, we're scared. They're telling us to be scared. They're telling us this is a pandemic in order to create vast societal changes. Now, there's not much you could do about it. You can fight it if you like, but it's like trying to stop a tidal wave with a thimble. It's here, folks. So now, instead of fearing it, we can figure out how to work with it. Instead of fearing the changes that are going to be coming, we dive into it, first of all. You just deal with it, dive into it, see where you're contracted, and see where there's some positivity, because everything has positivity. If there's negativity, there's positivity. That's just the way the world works. All right. I'm going to try and get a couple calls in here real quick. And then we have Dr. David Burns. His book is Feeling Great, coming up at the bottom of the hour. All right, my friend Bob. What do you got to say, Bob? You always have something cool to contribute.
Well, Ben, you just mentioned the complexity of metabolism. I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit on the complexity, the causes, as well as include hypermetabolism.
Hey, listen. The body is so deeply complex because you're dealing with trillions I mean, we can't even think of what that means, trillions, but just push your brain. The brain can't really go to trillions, but push it. We're dealing with trillions. No. We're dealing with hundreds of trillions of conscious entities, volitional conscious entities called cells that are somehow networked. Now, can you imagine the complexity of that, where each cell is networked with trillions of other cells? You know what I'm saying? There's no way.
Beyond the supercomputer. Beyond the supercomputer.
Beyond the supercomputer, yes. I mean, that alone is a meditation. Just ponder on that. But what we can do is we can control it from the macro level, through feeling, through emotion, through thoughts. When you think something different, your entire the cells from your top of your brain to the bottom of your foot change instantly when you think a thought. Can you get that, what I just said? Everything changes.
I should be able to shift myself into hyper metabolism.
Anything. No, Bob. Not you should. No, Bob, listen. You are doing it. You're just not doing it consciously. You're doing it. You're doing it right now. At every thought you think, when you say, I'm going to go pick up that pencil, right? Do you know what has to happen? The orchestration and the choreography, the cellular chemistry, the biochemical choreography that has to happen for you to lift up the pencil? Hormones are changing, and every cell of your body is responding to hormones differently when you say, I'm going to pick up that pencil. The genetics of your cells are changing when you say, every cell, all your genetics is changing when I say, I'm going to pick up that pencil. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but how do I know when I'm in hypermetabolism versus just standard?
Well, there's certain clues when you're in hypermetabolism. When you don't want hypermetabolism, but when you are in hypermetabolism, you'll be sweating, you'll be anxious, you'll be nervous. You want strong torque. You want torque. You don't want speed. You want torque. You know what I mean? You want power.
Yep.
Not
Gotcha.
speed. All right. We got to take we got to go take a commercial break here. Thanks a lot. I love it when you call, Bob. I really do. You always got something cool to say. Dr. David Burns coming up in our next segment. The book Feeling Great. I'm Pharmacist Ben. We'll be back after this. All right, we're back on the bright side. I'm Pharmacist Ben, and thanks for joining us. We're on the air Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 Pacific, 10 to 11 Central, and 24/7 on the archive page at benfuchsarchives.com. Check out Longevity products and my blog, and lots of videos and good health information, and a Join the Team link that you can click on at brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, and criticalhealthnews.com. And don't forget to take a look at our Truth Skin Health products, all formulated in my compounding pharmacy for healing wounds. Healing wounds is beautifying, and when you have healthy skin, you have beautiful skin, and that's what Truth Skin Health products are all about. Never any preservatives, fragrances, fillers, waxes, emulsifiers, water, silicone, vegetable oil, nothing your skin doesn't need or doesn't want in any of our Truth Skin Health products. And check out our 800-plus 5-star reviews at truthreviewed.com, truthreviewed.com. All right, I am really stoked to have our guest on. Dr. David Burns is the author of a book that I read many years ago called Feeling Good. And I consider Dr. Burns to be one of the fathers of cognitive behavioral therapy. His new book is called Feeling Great, the revolutionary new treatment for depression and anxiety. Welcome to the bright side, Dr. Burns.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be on your show. I see you're into healing, and I think today maybe we'll be talking about healing the wounds on the inside.
Love it. Love it. I read Feeling Good maybe 12, 13 years ago, and I've always been fascinated with the power of the mind to control the body, or how the body responds to the mind. But cognitive behavioral therapy back then was kind of a new thing. Now it's the main way people get treated, correct?
Yeah, when I wrote Feeling Good, there were only about a dozen cognitive therapists in the world. Most of us were at University of Pennsylvania Medical School, and people thought we were quacks because it was so radically different from the kind of long-term talking therapy I was trained to do as a psychiatric resident, and the idea that you could overcome depression quickly without medication, just people didn't believe it. But after the book came out, it's eventually sold along with the Feeling Good handbook, over 5 million copies, and cognitive therapy has become the most popular form of psychotherapy in history, the most widely used approach around the world, and it's become the most extensively researched form of psychotherapy in the world. So everyone is now into cognitive therapy. And
well, you said something really interesting. You said the University of Pennsylvania, and my mind immediately went to the happiness, the study of happiness. Isn't it the University of Pennsylvania where they're pioneering this kind of happiness as a science, or the science of happiness?
I suspect so. I haven't followed that work at all. It might be the work of Marty Seligman.
Seligman, exactly. Do you know him?
Psychology there. Yeah, yes, I knew him, especially when I was back at Penn. But now, for the past 20 years or so, we've been back home in California, and I'm now at Stanford Medical School.
Okay, so you raise an interesting point about when. By the way, I'm kind of bummed I didn't get to read Feeling Great. I usually like to read the book, and I definitely want to read. So I pre-ordered it off of Ken.
Thank you. So, it won't be out until September 15th, but I can tell you,
I'm going to ask you, I hope you don't mind telling us, because you bring up a subject that I always found very fascinating, because I love the idea of cognitive behavioral therapy, but there is an element of what you call therapeutic resistance. And the way I see it is that there's a level underneath in our unconscious or subconscious that is getting a payoff for how we're acting, or our depression, our seeming misery and suffering. There's a payoff there that's coming from an unconscious place. And how can that be addressed with cognitive therapy? And do you think that's a cause of therapeutic resistance?
Yeah, you've got it nailed. That's really what it is, and that was not a part of the original cognitive therapy, which cognitive therapy was amazing. It's all about changing these distorted thoughts that cause depression, like I'm no good, I'm a loser, I'll be depressed forever, and you've got all this all-or-nothing thinking and hidden should statements and emotional reasoning and self-blame and all these distortions. And when you crush those distortions and see that those thoughts aren't really true, your emotions can change almost instantly and dramatically. And that was as good as far as it went. But the problem was that some people have a kind of resistance to giving up their depression, and so they fight against therapists, no matter what school of therapy the therapist is using.
And they don't even know they're doing it.
No. They just keep yes-butting, and for some reason they don't want to let go of the self-criticisms, like a woman I treated recently who thought that she was a bad mother because her daughter had been shot in the face. And she blamed herself. I never should have let my daughter go out and play that night. And for 9 years, she'd been in misery. But do you see her self-criticisms, her guilt, and her shame were actually the reflection of what was most awesome and beautiful about her. The resistance. People resist change not because you have a chemical imbalance in your brain or because of what's wrong with you, but because of what's right with you. So
Elaborate.
So the new twist is that before we help people change these distorted self-critical thoughts, I've developed many powerful techniques to eliminate resistance. And it only takes in a therapy session maybe 20 minutes. And when people get the book Feeling Great, they can learn to do this for themselves. And the paradox is the moment you see that your self-criticisms and your depression and your hopelessness are actually good things that reflect what's most beautiful about you and your core values, the moment you see that, you suddenly won't need or want the depression and anxiety anymore, and then recovery can happen very, very quickly.
Okay, so I always thought that addiction is a reflection of this kind of self-criticism, self-hate, unpleasant angst.
No, it's actually not. Addictions are quite different. I did a study at Stanford of 170 patients that were admitted to the inpatient unit, and there were a lot of people with addictions, and a lot of people with depression, and a lot of people with anxiety, and a lot of people with troubled relationships. But there were no important connections between addictions and depression or low self-esteem or troubled relationships. That's kind of a myth. The thing that triggers addictions is temptations and positive thoughts. And if anyone listening is interested in that, you can go to my website, feelinggood.com, and I have 2 free unpublished chapters from the new book on state-of-the-art techniques for overcoming habits and addictions. But those methods are radically different from the methods for getting rid of depression and anxiety.
How about addiction to depression and anxiety? Does that occur?
Well, that's right. That's what the new book is all about. What causes people to cling to all of these self-critical thoughts. And we used to think that addiction to depression is due to something unflattering, like you like attention from being depressed, or you're afraid of change, or you have some kind of personality defect. But it's not that at all. The reason people are depressed and self-critical is often because you have high standards. Because you're willing to examine your own flaws and to see those flaws instead of rationalizing and a ton of other really awesome things. Like if you're anxious, you're trying to protect yourself from danger.
So all these so-called things that we label as being dysfunctional are actually functional?
Yeah. That's the whole thing. It's kind of turning the field upside down.
You're
wild. Not depressed and anxious because you have a mental disorder, like the American Psychiatric Association claims. You're depressed and anxious because of the beautiful and awesome things about you.
Doc, that's awesome. We got to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back right after this with Dr. David Burns, Feeling Great. Back on the bright side, talking to Dr. David Burns. His new book is Feeling Great. His old book is Feeling Good, which I read many years ago. Dr. Burns, that was very fascinating what you said before we went to break, that the things that we label as dysfunctional are actually beautiful and functional and signs of our conscientiousness, of our goodness, correct? Is that what?
Yes,
did I get that right?
That's the new addition from Feeling Good, and that's what has led to ultra-rapid recovery now from depression and anxiety. When Feeling Good came out, they did a lot of research on what happens if you just hand this person to someone with moderate to severe depression seeking treatment. The study was done at University of Alabama Medical School, and they told the people, well, it's going to be 4 weeks before you can see your psychiatrist for a medication or psychotherapy. But in the meantime, read this book. And they handed them a copy of Feeling Good. And then they studied them, what happens in those 4 weeks. And they reported that 50 to 65% of them improved so much that they no longer wanted or needed treatment. And that was great. But I wondered, how about the third of the people who didn't recover from being given a copy of that book? And that research led to the new book, Feeling Great, which has another dimension, new techniques that I didn't have when I wrote Feeling Good. And what I'm seeing clinically now is vastly faster recovery from depression and anxiety than in the old days when I simply had cognitive therapy. The new techniques are kind of like cognitive therapy on steroids, and I'm really hopeful that people who read the new book, Feeling Great, will also recover, perhaps even to a greater extent than the people who read my first book, Feeling Good.
Now, I don't think you're saying that just by recognizing that your depression is a sign of something higher or better or functional, that's how you get out of depression, because you can still say, okay, that's great, but I'm still depressed.
Yeah, you've got to do the written exercises in the book. Just insight has never been helpful to anyone. Empathy is helpful, but it has never cured anyone. And so the new book, even more so than Feeling Good, it was the same with Feeling Good. I urged the readers, hey, do this exercise right now. Write down your negative thoughts. Identify the distortions. See if you can use this technique to talk back to those thoughts. And the people who did those exercises, both just from reading the book, as well as the people in therapy, they're the ones who recover. And it will be the same with the new book. But I've got tremendous exercises to help readers learn this at the gut level. But you're really right. I mean, just giving people some positive cheer-up messages will never help. It's actually kind of irritating because it lacks empathy.
You said something cool there. You said gut level, right? So
yeah.
how much of it is somatic? How much of it is in the body, is stored? Do you ever hear a guy named Wilhelm Reich? Do you know about Wilhelm Reich's work?
I'm not
Okay, so he talked about
detail.
storing
Is he
things.
The Oregon box guy.
He's the Oregon guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he said that we store trauma in the body. And it's literally somatic. And I know I have friends who are massage therapists, and they're always telling me that when they massage people, sometimes they'll just start crying spontaneously, or they'll tell them about stuff that they hadn't thought about in years that was traumatic to them.
Yeah.
So is it conceivable that some of these things are not cognitive, that they're actually somatic?
It's the other way around. When you're depressed and anxious, it's a total body experience. And you can not only experience depression and anxiety, but intense somatic sensations as well. And about half of the people who go to medical doctors with pain and dizziness and somatic complaints and nausea actually have problems with depression and anxiety that they're not dealing with. And dealing with those problems can cause these symptoms to disappear. I treated a woman recently who had been incredibly anxious for 3 months, and she had nausea and vomiting, and she had lost, I think, 13 pounds. And I treated her. I treat people now with a single 2-hour session, and generally see a complete elimination of symptoms in one session. And that's what happened to her. By the end of the session, not only had her depression and anxiety disappeared, but she said, "Hey, I'm really hungry." And then I got a follow-up from her, and she's just doing great now, has regained her lost weight. But certainly negative thoughts trigger negative feelings, and you can experience that as exhaustion, as pain, as when you're panicky, you have tingling fingers, shortness of breath, a whole variety of things that instantly disappear the moment you stop believing the thoughts that trigger those negative feelings.
Do you know who Dr. John Sarno was? He wrote the Sarno method for psychosomatic symptoms.
I think I've heard of it. I'm not much of a reader. Is he the guy with the back pain?
Yeah, the back pain guy. Yeah, the back pain guy.
That's absolutely right. About half of the physical pain people experience is due to depression and anxiety. And if you reduce the depression and anxiety or make it disappear, in half the cases, the physical pain will disappear completely. So that's absolutely right. And many people get hooked by the medical profession. They go with somatic complaints, and then they get blood tests, X-rays, costly MRIs.
And they say, "I can't find anything." They say, "We can't find anything."
And the problem is they have a human problem, not a medical problem.
That's great. I love it. A human problem, not a medical problem. Being human has inherent problems that are non-medical, that we can't treat medically. So can you think beautiful thoughts on top of crappy thoughts, or do you have to actually deal with the crappy thoughts?
You have to deal with the crappy thoughts. The whole idea of, this positive affirmations and thinking positive thoughts, I mean, I hate to be crude, but it's really, really garbage. I've had over 40,000 therapy sessions with the most severe cases of depression and anxiety you can imagine, and it's because people are giving themselves negative, distorted messages. I'm a loser, or I know I'm about to die. I have shortness of breath, and all these panic-inducing thoughts and depression-inducing thoughts. And the moment they crush those thoughts and see that those thoughts are distorted and untrue, in that instant, the symptoms will disappear. But you could meditate for 100 years without it helping. Yeah. You can exercise endlessly, but if you still believe I'm a loser, you won't recover until you crush that negative thought.
You said what struck me about what you just said is the instantaneity with which it can occur, and that reminds me of Tony Robbins used to say, "I could heal people of things like instantly," and the Buddha said the same thing. But the Buddha and Tony Robbins both said the same thing. You could be enlightened in a split second, and I think that's kind of what you're alluding to.
Yes, people ask me, how long does it take to recover from depression or an anxiety disorder? Because as a psychiatric resident, I was taught years ago, and they're still being taught, it takes years of treatment to overcome these things. And I tell people that recovery generally happens in about 90 seconds.
That's awesome.
Now, it might take us an hour and a half to build up to that moment, but when it happens, it is a whoosh. And I think the Buddha was right about that. It's a total change in your values and the way you see yourself, the world, and the future. And it's one of the most beautiful experiences a human being can have.
It's like a phase shift or a quantum leap. It just happens, boom, like a quick jump, and all of a sudden you're in a new reality. Wow, that's awesome, Dr. Sarno. So do you see patients, correct? I'm sorry, I said Dr. Sarno.
Yes, I don't have a clinical practice anymore, but I still treat people all the time. I haven't charged anyone for a session for 25 years because it's just so much fun. I see people generally for one session, and then the treatment is done because the new techniques that I talk about in Feeling Great are so powerful.
Can people reach you through feelinggood.com?
Yes. My website has tons of free resources at www.feelinggood.com. My weekly Feeling Good podcasts are free. Many people who are depressed and anxious, and many therapists as well, listen to them. We have well over 100,000 downloads a month now, and many people mail in that just listening to the podcast has cured them of depression or anxiety.
Oh, that's awesome. When's the book coming out? I'm very excited.
It's out now. They're not going to release it until September 15th, which is, just about, I guess, less than just a few weeks. Just in a few weeks away, but people can order it on Amazon in a hardbound form or Kindle form, and they'll have an audio of it available pretty soon as well.
Well, I ordered it. I can't wait to start reading it. That was a wonderful half hour. Thank you so much, Dr. Burns. Appreciate you and your work.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on, and good luck to you. Nice to meet you, and hope we get a chance to chat again one day.
I'd love that, Dr. Burns. Have a beautiful day. All right, that's Dr. David Burns. His website, feelinggood.com. His book is Feeling Great. It will be available. It's available to pre-order now off of Amazon, and I have done so, and I can't wait to start reading it. And that's it for now. Thanks for listening to The Bright Side. I'm Pharmacist Ben. Have a wonderful, beautiful, awesome, spectacular day. We'll talk to y'all later, folks. Bye for now.